Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in to the SHC Division of Business podcast. This is your host, Ethan Sisk, and today we'll be featuring Miss Julia Vigneault. In today's episode, we'll cover different business sectors, the evolution of Spring Hill, and Miss Vigneault's return to academia. Morning, Miss Julia.
Good morning, Ethan.
She is on her second year of accounting.
Second semester
of accounting here at Spring Hill.
Yeah.
And has made a great addition to the business team so far.
Thank you.
And we're blessed to have her with us on this morning. She has worked in corporate America, managed a small business, and now academia.
Yes.
How would you compare those three fields?
Oh, goodness. Well, that could be a long conversation.
Yes.
So they all are obviously, I would say, very demanding, but in very different ways. Definitely really enjoyed all of them. Mm-hmm. I think the interesting thing about academia is that there's a lot of autonomy to kind of design your classes and decide how you're going to execute, which I think is really exciting, right? I really did enjoy my consulting experience. So I was in management consulting for 13, 14 years. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's a lot more structured and hierarchical, and calls on some different skill sets, but there's a lot of overlap, right? Like communication skills, presentation skills. If I'm totally transparent, my least enjoyable experience was small business ownership. Yes.
Was that based on the workload?
Yeah, it's very difficult. You know, I think if you are high achieving and committed to whatever it is you do, you're always going to have the challenge of when do I stop working? And when do, not just physical labor, but when do I turn my brain off with respect to work? Yeah. Right? And when you own the business,
24/7.
It's 24/7. There's no kind of external triggers to say, hey, this is when you stop, right? It's not because you've answered your last email. You could always be doing more. And finding that balance, I think, internally is one of the greatest challenges any small business owner has to figure out.
What led you to go into small business? Was it a passion for the business or opportunity to make money?
Well, no, I had, been very dedicated to my consulting career and really focused on continuously advancing within that career. And I reached I was working in a public accounting firm. So it's a very structured progression. And there's only, I think, 4 promotions essentially from entry level that you'll potentially get throughout your career. And I was up for that final promotion. And it's a very long process of flying around and interviewing and doing all these things and making sure you have your sales and, your business development and checking all the boxes. And I was going through it, and I found out it was going to be another year of that. And that was obviously, you've just run a marathon and someone says, here, run another one, right? And so I had to kind of sit down and think about it. And candidly, it was probably the first time I was truly, fully purposeful about looking at the trajectory of my life and saying, what do I really want? What are my values? And am I making decisions from a career perspective that are in alignment with those values? And while I so appreciate my experience in consulting, and I don't think I could begin to enumerate or quantify what I learned, tangibly and intangibly throughout that process, I realized that what was ahead in terms of promotion and everything else was not really in alignment with how I wanted my life to look, right? And so I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did know what I didn't want to do, which seemed like a good first step.
Yes, definitely.
Right? So I was living in the Washington, D.C. area in Arlington, Virginia, and I'd been there for a long time. And I knew, number one, I did not want to live in that area. I had actually never wanted to live there, but I did for over a decade. And so I, made a plan, and I didn't have all the steps. So I said, okay, step 1 is move. I don't want to be in this area anymore. I want something a little not as fast-paced and congested. And I had actually managed health food store in this area when I was in college, when I was at Spring Hill. And I had so loved that job.
Is the health store still here?
Yeah, so Fairhope Health Foods.
Okay.
I actually started there before they opened, and the owner of that owns Virginia's Health Foods as well. That was her original location. So I kind of worked at both, but I managed the Fairhope location.
So you would commute from Mobile to Fairhope with school?
Oh, no. I commuted from Fairhope to Mobile. So I lived in Fairhope.
Okay.
Yes. And came to Mobile for class. And then, it was a lot.
I'm sure there's a few mornings of backup on the...
Of chaos, yeah. I don't recall being too late. I also don't think I took 8 o'clock classes, to be honest.
Smart maneuver.
But, yeah, I took a lot of night classes for sure. Because I was always working full-time while I was in school.
So that conversation you had with yourself to kind of determine your trajectory, I feel like those are some of the most important ones us as people have. But they're so hard.
Yes.
Because once you're going... Because it feels like a waste of time, right? Because you're like... No, I just need to do something. But if you assess and then make the educated decision, then it's, usually yields better. I'm struggling with that, instead of just going.
Yeah.
What makes sense?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And if you're in a rapid enough environment and industry, you don't need to look for the next thing because the next thing is already laid out for you.
The next few things are waiting for you to do.
Yeah, I got promoted to this level. This is the next thing. And often in management consulting in particular, they will tell you the moment you get promoted, you should be thinking about your next promotion and start your planning. So I always had goals, in mind. But at that point, when I made the decision to change careers, I realized, I haven't sat down and thought about, are these my goals? Is this what I want? And so because I had worked in retail and essentially functioned as the owner in many ways, I would have come to realize not in every way once I opened my business, I thought it would be a good venture, a good thing to try my hand at. Right. And so I moved to Savannah. It's got a lot in common with Fairhope. It's just bigger. And I opened a surf shop.
Are you a surfer yourself?
Not a very good one. And definitely more snowboarding because I was in the Northeast. Yeah. But
Is it similar technique?
Yes and no.
Okay.
You're putting your weight in some different places. I would say being comfortable with a board sport will make you more comfortable trying another board sport, but you're not necessarily going to step off the slopes and just kill it at surfing.
Yeah,
it's a little different.
No.
But at least you get to land in the water, which is nice.
Yeah.
So.
That's great. I have a friend that's doing a class in Costa Rica. It's like a month-long, 2-month-long class, but it's like just surfing.
Yeah. They have great camps down there. Yeah. And great waves. Yeah.
So hopefully he stays away from the sharks.
And Dr. James is big on the surfing.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. He's got the surf map in his office when you walk in.
Oh, I thought that was for fishing.
No, it's surfing. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to academia. I feel a common complaint from college graduates is that some of the material taught in classrooms isn't applicable to actual business situations. Would you agree or disagree with this statement?
Oh, we're doing hard-hitting questions. Well, okay, I will answer that question with the disclaimer that I have not sat in any college class except mine for over a decade.
I'm just asking about your experience.
Yeah. No, so my experience, and obviously I know I keep qualifying, but it's specific to the jobs that I chose and the careers I went into. So my experience, I got my undergrad in accounting. I got an MBA with an emphasis in accounting, right? And then I went into consulting, and I found that what I learned in college was essential foundation, like baseline. Like I needed that. I would call it technical knowledge, right? If we're talking about within the business discipline, I'm not so much speaking to the humanities and all that, which I will speak to. We're absolutely critical to being foundationally qualified and competent for that job, 100%. But there's definitely a lot of skills, soft skills, that are critical to continued success in the workplace.
Would you say those are developed in school or in the workplace as you kind of get a hang of it?
I think both, but a lot of them are very dependent on interaction, right? So team interaction, interpersonal interaction, supervisor, subordinate interaction, and kind of navigating those experiences, as well as like networking situations, industry situations. So I think you have the opportunity to start building them in college.
Definitely.
But a lot of them will get really strong and refined through your work experience. And then I'm a huge fan of the liberal arts. So the humanities and the social sciences, to me, are what make you a well-rounded human and are going to make your value in any situation that much greater, because you have a much more broad and deep perspective on life. And at the end of the day, no matter what field we're talking about, it's all humans experiencing life, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. So I would say it is all important.
Good.
But it's not the full story.
Well, then, to kind of piggyback on the initial question, are you able to implement the material, I guess, you deem necessary in the workplace into your classes now, being able to do both?
So that's a fascinating question. Whenever I find that, so that is one of my top goals, is to continuously find more and more ways to identify what would be useful to the students, identify what the students would feel would be useful to them, and then bring that into the classroom whenever it makes sense, right?
Definitely. But do you feel that you have a better understanding from actually being in the field yourself?
Better? Yes. I think one challenge that your initial question somewhat alluded to is that, for lack of better words, book knowledge without life context can be difficult to absorb.
Yes,
right?
That's what I'm getting at.
Yes. I took auditing in college. I didn't understand a word of it. I did really well because I memorized things. And then I got into my career and I spent over a decade around audit, and I went, oh, this is what we were talking about, right? And so to the extent I can bridge that gap, absolutely. That is one of my top goals when I am teaching a lesson, is how do I make this, make sense and give them how this plays out in the workplace.
I feel it's priceless for students, and
I hope so.
it definitely is.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about how you developed accounting skills in school versus how you developed them in the workplace?
Yeah, great question. So
kind of about auditing, I guess.
Yeah.
As an example.
Oh, auditing, man. Okay, so accounting is one of those fields where there's a tremendous amount of, again, what I call technical knowledge. You just need to know this, right? This is how things are done. And so in school, it was definitely much more about understanding the thinking behind it. It's very similar to logic, I would say, in a lot of ways.
I gotta run away from that.
Yeah, I find that if you enjoy logic, you probably or might enjoy accounting. There's a lot of similarities. So once you kind of understand that the conceptual framework behind how all of accounting is structured, then it becomes a lot easier. And then there is a lot of memorization for sure. So that's more, and practice. And
debits, credits. Accounts payable.
Love them. And so from, in school, that's kind of the focus is understanding, and I hate to say it, but to a degree, memorizing. When you get into the workplace, it's much more application-based, right?
Okay.
So an audit is a group of folks coming to look at somebody's accounting information and develop an opinion on whether it's accurate, right? Whether they think there's fraud, whether they think, the numbers are completely wrong. And to be in a position like that requires a ton of critical thinking capability, because there's no book that says, hey, when you go audit, I spent most of my career working with the military, so like with the Marine Corps, and no one had actually even audited the military ever in the history of this country. And so all these concepts had to be applied to a completely new, they have a whole different accounting paradigm. And so having to take these standards and say, okay, how are we even going to do this? Yeah. That's the exciting part, right? So I think that's one thing that
it's like a puzzle in a sense.
Yeah, it's hard to convey in class, whether it's accounting or economics or any topic, how when you're learning that core stuff, how this can end up being exciting and being fun and challenging you, right? Like you need that knowledge to be able to move into those strategic decision-making discussions about when we go to this client, how are we going to do this, right? And that's where it's fun.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel the most importance is because, not everything's solution-based in a sense. There's random variables that come in.
Yes, absolutely.
And,
absolutely.
That's things in life you can't predict.
That's one thing that is probably very true is there's very few absolutes, if any, right?
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes textbooks can sound like there are absolutes, but when you get out there, you go, oh, it's all gray,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for current students who are taking steps toward developing their own accounting skills?
Ooh,
Practice.
I would say number one, focus on trying to understand. I'm going to sound like I'm repeating myself, but if the framework behind it isn't making sense, if when you learn something new, it doesn't kind of click, like it might take a while to get it under your belt. But if it doesn't click, like this logically follows from what we've already done, then I would spend some time going back and trying to understand why we do things the way we do. Mm-hmm. If you understand why, then I would move on to, some practicing, just, do those problems that everybody loves. But I think that's really the best way. And then hands-on experience never hurts. When I was in college, I did a lot of accounting for other businesses. And I think that potentially more than anything makes it click, like what's going on and why we're doing this.
A quote that one of my mentors told me is that you either learn how to account and be an accountant for your own money, or you pay someone to do it.
This is true, yeah.
So
yeah.
You can't get around accounting.
That's true.
Okay. What would you say some of the pros and cons are within, small businesses to corporate America?
Oh.
Like,
yeah.
Is it, and to kind of rephrase the question, is it harder to be your own boss, or is it easier to be your own boss, or is do you want orders, or do you like to?
I hate rules and being told what to do, generally speaking.
Yeah.
However, there's trade-offs, right? When you work in a larger organization with a hierarchy, it lets you off the hook a little bit in that you don't have to agonize about every decision because somebody else is saying this is the way it's going to be. And so just from a stress perspective, that can sometimes make life a little easier to navigate. But the trade-off there is you're going to have some frustrating situations where that it would be better to do it a different way.
Yeah.
And you're not the boss, right? Or maybe you are the boss, but then your boss came in and said, no, we're not doing it that way. And those can be very frustrating, especially if you're passionate about your client and about the work you're doing, right? And then in corporate America, you're going to end up with requirements that you just have to do, compliance and training and all these things.
Yeah.
And so, but the flip side is there's a lot of security, and a little bit less stress, again, from that having full responsibility for all decisions. So when you go to small business ownership, obvious upsides, right? You get all of the reward. And I know everyone's heard this. You have all of the risk. And it is super true. More risk, more potential reward. But I think
theory.
I tried, and I'm glad I tried. But there's also more potential loss. And so it's definitely can be intimidating, and I would say anyone interested in going into small business needs to have a really good handle on how they manage stress and how they manage their time.
Okay.
It's a lot of people are very successful. Miss Wellborn does it, but both have their ups and their downs.
Are there any kind of entrepreneurs you gained inspiration from in your small business quest?
Yeah, actually. So different line of work. But when I wanted to leave the DC area and move to Savannah, I wasn't ready to open a business yet. So I was looking for a job that would let me be remote, but still in the same industry, same paycheck, so that I could, make changes gradually. And a good dear friend of mine had opened a small business probably like 12 years prior, and in consulting. And his first job as a company was actually working for my company as a subcontractor. So we worked together. And over those 12 years, he grew it to like a $100 million company. Wow. Right? Yeah, it was super impressive.
What kind of company was it?
It was consulting, management consulting. And so I consulted with him when I was looking to move, and he said, well, I think you should go somewhere, that you're already established. And he needed someone to run a project. So he asked me to come over to his business. But kind of having conversations with him and just having known him over that decade was super helpful.
I feel like that's great because it's like a real person you can ask. Like,
yes.
For me, I got all these kind of people online I look for inspiration. And,
I do that too.
Yeah. But you can't beat a real figure that you can see is living.
Well, and my mom actually owns a small business. So
awesome.
A little bit different in that she didn't start it. She had worked there, and then when the owner retired, she bought him out. But also had that resource available.
Is it local to Mobile?
Fairhope.
Fairhope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice.
So.
What would you say the most important components would be for kind of having a sound foundation and going for a small business? Is it, being able to manage stress, or is it the capital or networking?
Oh, great question. If it depends on the nature of the business. I had a retail business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say if you're doing anything that's geographically located, that's not online, obviously you need a plan and you need an understanding of the area and the market. You truly need to know who's walking by those doors every day.
Survey.
You need to talk to other business owners, and hopefully they will be transparent with you about, what are the trends? When do sales fall? What, how have things been over the last 3 years? How do you think things are going to be going forward? How long have you been here? So, if their information is even, helpful. Yeah. I would say understanding your market I can't even begin to quantify how important. So, for example, in Savannah, there was a very strong surf community, very, very strong. And they were very supportive for my events and for my online presence. But I was downtown, and it turned out that because there were so many tourists downtown, the locals rarely, if ever, came downtown. So it was just, so while in theory the market was there was an actual impediment. And if I had, lived in Savannah longer or maybe done a bit more research, I would have been more in tune with that nuance, right? So gathering as much data as you can about what might impact your business.
Definitely. Makes sense.
Yeah.
I went to Savannah for a cousin's wedding. And are you familiar with Orange Crush?
Yes.
It so happened to be the same weekend as Orange Crush.
Oh, no.
It was crazy.
Yeah, they I think they fired the police chief over that situation. Really? I could be wrong on Tybee. Yeah.
Because what drew everyone in is that you can have open containers. So they're inviting it.
And downtown Savannah is the same way. Yeah. So.
But gorgeous city for sure. I love the Spanish moss.
It's beautiful.
I saw it there before I saw it here.
Beautiful.
It really is.
Yeah. It's a little creepy. It's the most haunted city in America.
I heard that. I don't know if that was true.
I never did a ghost tour or anything like that. I ran into them a lot just walking downtown. Because downtown's
the ghost or the tours?
Oh, well, I don't know. That's where I was going with this. So there was one square. So Savannah's famous for having, they're really roundabouts, but in the center of the roundabout is, greenery and trees. And there's 31 perhaps. And the ghost tours will take the tourists around and tell them the legend of whatever square they're in. Mm-hmm. And I think all of Savannah is built on an Indian burial ground. So I don't know if you saw Poltergeist, but that always kind of scared me.
Wow. No,
but there was one square where I would walk my dogs, and I'd say like 4 or 5 times one of my dogs just stopped and looked terrified and would not move. And it was always the same square. She looked like she had seen a ghost, and I would have to carry her for 2 blocks until she was willing to walk again. So I didn't really want to know, but when I was moving, I finally, Googled the square, and it's the most haunted square in Savannah, and there's all this, really crazy history about it.
Which square was it?
I think it's Wright Square.
Wright Square. I went on a tour of a few, but I can't remember the names.
Yeah. If you look it up,
That's creepy.
It's a dark history. So, yeah, I just stopped going through that one.
Is there a certain time, like historical time period, you like to research or learn about?
I don't know why, but I absolutely am fascinated with World War II.
Really?
Yes. It's just obviously a terrible event, but also just so fascinating. And actually here I don't know what history course it would have been, but when I was at Spring Hill, the history course I took must have been 20th century history. And I vividly remember the films we watched about World War II and learning about it. I find it fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, such a pivotal point. I mean, so much more could have happened. I mean,
yeah. Terrible with the Civil War and the French Revolution.
Yeah.
But
well, a period to bring back to the Savannah Indian massacre. I love learning about the Native Americans.
Oh, okay.
Kind of how they pioneered through North America. But I mean, once you really dive into it, it's so much deeper than everything. I mean, they were the tribes like mass fighting.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's just super fascinating to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll have to do and see if I can find it, tracing back to Savannah.
Yeah, that would be really interesting.
Yeah. Is there a certain quote you gain inspiration from? I know many business professionals have like a saying or a quote they look for when they need inspiration. Do you have one yourself?
Oh gosh, I bet without the question I could have come up with one. I probably spent hundreds, if not thousands, of hours watching YouTube on leadership and motivation and business success. And
do you find that helpful in your kind of?
To a degree, I would caution folks that there's not always one right way to do things, and if you consume enough of anything, it'll kind of stick in your head, and it might create an impediment to making the decision that might be best for you because you've got someone famous in your head saying this is the right way to do things, right? So, gosh.
Well, back to the social media, like I think it's great the knowledge that's accessible, but also I feel like social media in itself is a big distraction from us being present.
There's my quote
in the outside world.
I did think of one. So, well, I don't know if it's a quote, but I heard somewhere, so hopefully this is accurate.
Yeah.
Carnegie, his wealth increased so quickly and so dramatically that the U.S. government thought he must be doing something, really, really wrong. And I think he was interviewed by Congress. But someone asked him, if not Congress, somebody, to what do you attribute your success? And he said, I have the ability to focus on one thing for an extended period of time. And I think that is so true. That's a skill that I continuously seek to have, but always need to improve. And I think a lot of us find that. But I think focus is really key in a lot of ways.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I heard Chris Williamson, he's got a podcast on YouTube. He said, you want to be able to stick the course and be successful without telling yourself you're smarter than you are, because in that moment, then you get on your high horse and then, you get content. But if you constantly just 1% upward climb.
I'm going to circle back to a question you asked earlier.
Please.
About small business owners. One thing that comes to mind is one of the greatest challenges is navigating the exceptionally fine line between believing in yourself, which you have to, right? Believing in yourself and being committed to success, and taking on too much risk and not appropriately planning for if it does not work out. Does that make sense?
It does.
And it's very hard. How do I have full faith and confidence in the outcome? And I think that's the trick, is that you can't focus as much on the outcome, and you have to focus on the process.
Yes.
And reaping reward from the process, so that planning for if the outcome isn't your desired outcome, it's not a crushing experience.
You did what you could.
Internally or financially or, what have you. Yeah.
There's a great book I read. The name escaped me, but it was about small business and small business startup, and it said, the stats on whatever 90% of them fail.
Yeah, yeah.
But is that because people have this great passion and they want to taking into business, but you know their passion isn't business, and you gotta kind of have the business side.
That's exactly it.
And then it kind of can drive you at a wedge with your passion because you know the other component you need, business, you don't have.
Well, and so on that point, you know, and business is obviously a very diverse category, right?
Yes.
So, for example, I obviously enjoy accounting. Don't enjoy marketing. I mean, God love them. I'm so happy they exist, but I don't want to do it. And it's like pulling teeth for me to do anything in the marketing arena, right? And so there's going to be aspects of owning your own business that you're not going to enjoy. And if you, you know, if you don't plan to outsource them, you need to be fully committed to taking them on yourself.
And it's tough taking it all by yourself.
Yes. And it can be tough to outsource depending on what your budget is, right? So, yeah.
Tricky.
Yes.
How would you say Spring Hill has changed since your time here as a student, now as your time here as a professor? Is it a cool full circle moment?
It is a full circle moment. It was the first time I drove in, you know, the gates. I think it was for like new faculty orientation, and I expected it to be a strange feeling, and instead it was a very comfortable and comforting feeling.
That's
It was
awesome.
like, oh, okay, I remember this, and candidly, it looks almost exactly the same. The library had just been built when I was graduating, so I had seen that. Student Center is new.
Yes.
I think there was something there before. I don't remember it, but other than that, not a whole lot has changed. And some of my professors are still here.
That's so cool.
So that's really cool.
How was lunch yesterday with Professor Ralph?
Oh, Dr. Sandler. Yeah. So
Ralph Sandler.
Dr. Sandler. So when I was here, we had something called the 5-year program where if you were majoring in accounting, you could start taking graduate courses. If you took the GMAT and got accepted to the MBA program here, you could start taking your 500 level courses while you were still a junior, I think. So I did that program, and he was my graduate instructor for like some of the toughest classes I took. I think quantitative business methods. You know, you're doing like the Black-Scholes model and all this stuff, and a few other ones. And he was those were hard classes, but he was always very fair. Yeah. Although I did give him a tough time because I looked at my transcript and I said, "You gave me a B in this class."
Your lowest grade,
yeah.
right? You said? Yeah.
But no, he's so great, and he's so kind, and he loves the college.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great. He comes to visit us, you know, every few Fridays.
That's one beautiful thing I think about Spring Hill is that, you know, if you love it, you love it, and you're completely bought in. And like at big schools, you know, I don't know if you necessarily find that, but here, you know, people. I mean, it's really a community.
Community, yeah. For me, I went to a very small high school. My senior class only had 30 people.
Wow.
Yeah, so I had direct access to all of my teachers all of the time. Yeah. My AP classes had 4 or 5 people in them. And so I went to Alabama as a freshman. And
night and day, just
night and day, yeah. And it was, I know it's an amazing experience for a lot of people. They thrive in that big environment. But for me, I was so used to having that interpersonal, even if I didn't actually speak to my professors, because I don't think I did a whole lot until I got, you know, farther into my college career. I knew that I could, and I know they knew my name, and I know they'd notice if I wasn't in class, which was a big one. So, yeah, that always really appealed to me.
What do you think of the phrase, like, know which rules can be bent and know which rules you can't break? Do you feel like that's an important thing for life? Because I can kind of compare that to like the classes, knowing if the teacher knows when to be gone, then you know, I need to be there.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that that statement. You know, and it's got a different heft depending on what the context is. Whether you're talking about you're just talking about college class
or federal law,
right? Yeah, so it depends on the scenario. But I absolutely agree, and I think the big part, I think the people whoever said that and tends to reiterate it is. Perhaps I always interpret it as know which rules to break because you'll get a better outcome, or, you know, it's what, and, you know, absolutely. But also just knowing that you're okay with whatever the consequence, like just be aware of whatever the consequence is, and then make a decision, like which way is better for you. Right.
Yeah, it makes sense. Gotta kind of tread with caution.
Yeah.
Do you plan to make it back to the corporate world, or do you think you found your new passion with teaching?
Oh, you couldn't separate those questions? No, I love teaching.
Yes.
It's such a new animal that I think if it were any other job, corporate type job, then 6 months in, you'd feel like, okay, I get what's going on here. I've got it under control. And I feel like with teaching, it is this continuous process of learning. And certainly this whole first year is me learning. How do I want to do this? What works? What doesn't? How do I communicate this effectively? So it's a longer assimilation period, for sure. I don't see myself going back to corporate America.
Okay.
I could be wrong.
Would you give small business another shot?
Not retail.
Not retail.
Okay. I would absolutely give entrepreneurship another shot. I don't think it would be retail unless someone said, hey, my business makes $10 million profit dollars a year. Would you like to take it over?
Yeah.
Then I would absolutely take on retail.
Yeah.
But entrepreneurship for sure. Consulting or, corporate consulting. I don't think so. I really like teaching. I'm sure everybody says it, but I love the students. I love
That's great.
getting to know them.
That's great.
And everyone's just this whole world, right? And so every time I get to interact with someone and get a little bit more of what that world is like, it's invigorating. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Well, we're so happy to have you here at Spring Hill, and
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you on this podcast interview, whatever you want to call it.
Thank you. This was so kind of you. I hope.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah.
We'll get
something
it up on
useful out of it.
Yeah.
So.
on the business page, and I'm sure many students can gain some insight into the accounting field and just different, paths you've taken in your life.
Yeah, and I'm always available if anyone wants to talk about accounting.
Great.
Or life or careers. So.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. Appreciate it.
I want to personally thank everyone who tuned in the first episode of the SHC Division of Business podcast. Our aim is to give young professionals insight into their desired field or potential job of choice. If you gained anything from this or have any compassion whatsoever, please share with someone you see fit.